Hello and welcome to one of those rare talking points where I actually cover another game. Obviously, most of my content is Flesh and Blood related, but today I want to talk to you about Genesis Battle of Champions, which I have done a Learn to Play video on before. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Steelfur, aka Finbar, a London-based card game player. I play Magic Commander, I play Flesh and Blood, I play some older card games like Legend of the Five Rings, LTG, and I played Lord of the Rings TCG and some other card games like WWE Raw Deal and stuff like that. You know, flashbacks every now and then. Today I'm here to talk to you about the Genesis Battle of Champions Kickstarter. This is quite an interesting game from my perspective, and one that I really want to sort of have a bit of a look at. You can see I am a backer. Let's talk about that in a second, because they do have a content creator package that I've decided to back it, although I do already have some of the game kicking around the house. So let's just talk a little bit about what Genesis is. Let's see if we can have a bit of a look at this video. I don't really want to look at the hype, the creator. Is there a good image here of what Genesis is? Okay, maybe we'll just play this.
It's rich with a magical energy called aura. Genesis borrows from many genres of gameplay. It has a complex and unique deck building process. It has a strong focus on a tactical gameplay of the creator.
Right, let's just start this over. Let's hear what they have to say completely. Now that I've sorted out the audio. Okay, elves, fairies, pretty standard fantasy sci-fi fare at this point. Let's make myself a little bit you don't need to see my face. Christmas beard. Vampires, exciting.
Hey champions, I'm Asid, the creator of Genesis Battle of Champions, a tactical collectible card game. I have been obsessed with collectible card games since I was 7, and when I was 15 I started designing my own card games.
Not that part, but the obsession, for sure.
In that time, I have learned a lot about designing games, and the earlier games that I made were completely terrible and totally unbalanced. But after several attempts and many epiphanies, I created Genesis. Genesis takes you out from behind your hand and into the battle of your life. You are a champion who is adept in powerful magics and physical combat. Other champions will challenge you to a battle in an arena. Mythical areas rich with a magical energy called aura. Genesis borrows from many genres of gameplay. It has a complex and unique deck building process. It has a strong focus on a tactical gameplay experience and deep, rich lore for you to explore. While designing Genesis, I found certain aspects that I felt were necessary for the game to be enjoyable. These became our 4 pillars of gameplay. Start strong, struggle later. If you are going into combat, wouldn't you aim to be at full strength when you enter the arena? In Genesis,
This is quite interesting because this is something that modern game design has leaned quite heavily into. If you look at card games like Flesh and Blood, or even things like Keyforge and stuff like that, modern games really start with the idea that you shouldn't be limited towards building up in order to get off or feel powerful in the game. So to get off your good combos or feel powerful in the game. And that's a very core design for a modern game because you talk to some people, and I've talked to some people who started playing Flesh and Blood and say that they find Flesh and Blood a bit daunting because it basically feels like you've reached turn 6 or 7 of a game of Magic, but on turn 1, where in Magic by 6 or 7, everyone has a few artifacts in play, everyone has a few lots of lands, they can do whatever they need to do, and they also have an enchantment or something on the board that's creating some sort of threat. But obviously modern games like that, Keyforge, Flesh and Blood, go in the opposite direction, where they start off with this massive board presence of 4 equipment, your weapon, a full hand of cards, and then slowly whittle that down to the point where you're throwing away less and less energy. But it's interesting from a strategic point of view because those games reward resource control and strategy throughout the entire game, because obviously if you're building up to something and you don't draw it, then that can be a bit of a problem, i.e. you don't draw your lands or you don't draw your key combo pieces in Magic, right? Comparatively, if you're playing a game where you start off with full power, then it becomes less of I didn't draw X and more of I spent X too quickly or I spent X too fast and got to a point where I didn't have the cards I needed to do the strategy, or my opponent spent their resources smarter than I did and therefore they won in the end, right? And that's really where we're seeing a lot of modern game design go, and it's a really fascinating place because it lets skill come in from the very start of the game and removes that element of, well, I didn't draw what I needed. There's still a bit of that, but it reduces that to a point of, well, have you spent your resources correctly? Have you optimized your gameplay from the very first turn rather than spending a turn or two building up, right? It does mean that there is less things like ramp and stuff like that because it's hard to give ramp when the game is already at a very high power level, but it does create a lot of opportunities for good players to shine from the very start. And this one is one of the things that caught me about this game from the beginning.
With all your resources at the beginning of the match and get weaker as you fight for your life. Always have options. Genesis is built on the concept that you are an epic warrior with the ability to call down meteor showers and summon mighty angels. But when push comes to shove, sometimes you just need to punch your opponent in the face. Genesis favors the defender.
Again, something that you can see in the design of something like Keyforge, because you can play whatever cards you want in any combination that makes sense in your hand. You always have options, as versus some older games, like if, for example, I don't like to go on too much about MTG, but it is kind of the format of, it is kind of the bugbear of the industry, the sort of the big giant. But ultimately, if you don't have the mana and it doesn't line up with what's in your hand, you don't have any options to play. And that's something that modern games are really trying to design their way around. It's one of the reasons that I'm so critical about MetaZoo when we do those kind of videos, is that it copies Magic's system, which is great because there's a familiarity in the whole land concept design, but it's also inherently flawed in many ways because you can or cannot do things on your turn, as versus games like Flesh and Blood, games like Keyforge, games like Legend of the Five Rings LCG, where you can pretty much always do something. Maybe it's not the most optimal move because you don't have enough resources or you haven't managed your resources properly, but it's never the game saying no. The game is just saying, well, if you'd wanted to do that, you should have done this instead. Or maybe you can do this turn in order to do that next turn, which creates a really interesting strategic decision matrix throughout the entire game, which is actually very important for building up slow strategic advantage.
As a trained fighter, if you see an attack coming straight at you, you should be able to throw a preemptive strike that could neutralize your opponent or even kill them before their attack lands. You are in an arena. In Genesis, there is no set timing for combat to occur. Champions and summons can engage in combat at any time, as long as they can reach an opponent. When I started Haunted Castle Gaming 4 years ago, I did not know what it would take to make Genesis. There were many unknowns and risks between design, testing, manufacturing, distribution, players' needs, and retailers' needs. I was not willing to make those mistakes on someone else's dollar. However, since then, I have built a strong relationship with awesome players, store owners, distributors, and content creators. We have shown our commitment to doing right by our community through every step of the process. We are ready to take Genesis to the next level. We need your help. In this Kickstarter, we are going to fund the release of our next set, Origins. This Kickstarter is designed to be a thank you for everyone who has supported us over the years, and I hope it will be an entry point for many more players to discover not only this game, but the great people and players who have brought it to life. Are you ready to become a champion?
let's talk about the good points about this video, okay, and talk about Kickstarter in general. I have a very simple rule when it comes to Kickstarter. Anyone who's talked to me for any length of time about Kickstarter in the board gaming industry will understand that rule, and most of you probably share it at this point. If you are a company, and sorry for those of you who have really creative ideas, if you are a company that has no track record of making a game, successfully delivering a game, or doing anything in the gaming space, you will not get my money. It's very, very simple. Kickstarter is a very unsecured system. I give you money in the hope that you will deliver. And unless I have a personal relationship with you where I know or believe that you can deliver a product, unless you have demonstrated that you can, I'm not going to give you my money. And that extends to pretty much every Kickstarter I have backed since, we'll say, 2004 or whatever. Whenever Kickstarter started to become a thing, I remember I backed one or two things because they looked cool, and obviously nothing came out of them. I didn't lose that much money because they were fairly cheap, but I was just like, okay, something's wrong here. And we saw a lot of scams and a lot of people taking money and not delivering everything. And Star Citizen happened. Let's just pause for a second. Star Citizen happened, right? I backed Star Citizen for 60 quid. I thought, okay, this is a decent price for a game. Maybe I'll get it in a few years' time and it'll be fun. Maybe I'll buy a better ship if the game comes out and it's good. Guess what? Still waiting for that one. My point is, so if you haven't done something in the gaming space, I'm not trusting you to make a game, no matter how cool your concept is or anything like that. So the Kickstarters I've backed to date, I wonder if I could show you. No, I won't show you. I'll just talk about it. I've backed Frosthaven because I have a copy of Gloomhaven on my shelf. And I'd seen it in the store and I wanted it. And they said, hey, look, if you back Frosthaven, we'll give you Gloomhaven at like 30% off. I was like, well, I've wanted Gloomhaven for a while. I know you make games, so I'll do that. I backed a Terraforming Mars Kickstarter because they'd already made Terraforming Mars. I backed a few other Kickstarters which were made by companies who've made 10, 15 board games. Because what they're demonstrating to me is that they've delivered something already, and really what they're looking for is capital, crowdsourced capital, in order to make something else. And if you are a board game company, you know how important it is to get a bit of money to build a concept or a design, and to not risk the bank, because not everyone is Asmodee or could throw loads of money into making an untested board game. So, them selling stuff in advance for something that's not going to come out for 3 or 4 years' time, if it's a company that's done that before, I'm cool with that idea. I'm patient enough to realize that if I just wait for like 3 or 4 years, I can get a really cool board game at a pretty good entry price just by investing in it early. And I'm fine if that's the model, if I'm trusting someone who has already made something. And that's, I think, important to understand about where I'm coming to this Genesis Kickstarter from, because I do already have Genesis product. Someone has already said to me, hey, Genesis is a really cool game. Why don't you drop? And we had one store in the UK backing it, which was, I think, Top Deck In, and they had some of the beta and some stuff like that. And they were like, why don't you buy the beta starter box? It's like 20 quid, have a bit of a look. And I had a bit of a look at it, and I was like, this is really interesting. We've got this arena setup of physicality in a TCG, which I haven't seen before. The rules are incredibly straightforward to learn. As I said in my rules video that I've already done on the game, I went from knowing nothing about the game to understanding A, how to build a deck, and B, how to play in about 3 or 4 minutes, just based on the cards. Now, I obviously have a lot of TCG experience, but even within that context, going from straight zero in a game to understanding how a game plays in a few minutes just by reading some cards that came with the starter deck is really, really good. And to draw parallels, of course, between other new games that started, you understood, and if you watched my MetaZoo video, as to how confusing I found trying to figure out how you'd actually play a game of MetaZoo and what all the keywords meant and all this other stuff, compared to the simplicity of understanding Genesis. Because remember, a golden rule for TCGs, the rules should not be where the complexity lies. Okay? It's very important. The rules should not be where the complexity lies. Complexity should come from the card interactions, the gameplay, the way different factions play, but not in the core rule set. It's one of the big problems with a game like The Legend of the Five Rings LCG is that the core rule set is designed like a Euro game, so a strategy game with lots of moving pieces where you build up resources and move tokens on lots of different cards, etc., etc., etc. When really card games should function along an incredibly simple axis, and the successful TCGs have harness this axis. Flesh and Blood is very, very simple. I pitch a card, I pay for something, I draw my hand back up to 4. right? It's very, very simple to understand. I can block, I can attack, I can defend. I have to deal this much life to win. Magic the Gathering, fairly easy to understand. Play a land, tap it, gets a mana, play a card that matches the cost. Like, they're all the good games, even like Runeterra and Hearthstone, all operate along very, very simple axes, and the complexity comes from the cards. And I saw the exact same thing in Genesis when I sat down to review the rules, that I could see the every time I read a card, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But I was never confused as to how to play that card in the game. I only asked questions about how to play that card optimally, and that is a very core part of game design that shows me that someone has spent a lot of time tuning their game to make it work in a fun and interactive manner. So you can see that his 4 design principles are actually very, very good in my mind, right? And having played a game or two, I can definitely say that they do pan out. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect on this, but it is interesting because the basic core of the game is you're going to play cards. Those cards are going to be an effect or a trigger, or they're going to be a summon, or they're going to be a technique or something. They're going to have a set cost. So these symbols on the right determine which decks can play them. I think each deck is based around a champion that dictates what cards can go in the deck, and those are your combinations here. So they're kind of like your commander in Magic. You can't run black cards in a red-blue deck, etc., etc. And then you're going to go into it and build a deck out of cards that match those symbols. And then you're going to come in with, techniques and summons or creatures and spells and stuff like that. That's going to give you a lot of different options. Okay? And really, the things I saw were there's a lot of good abilities that kind of give you interesting, like, teleportation and movement. And I think that's one of the important things to understand about this game, and it was mentioned briefly in the video, is that one of the elements of this game that most interested me is that it is doing something new-ish when it comes to tactical collectible card games, right? Most collectible card games shy away from adding a physical element because they feel that it overcomplicates the game, basically. You don't want to be playing Magic with an arena that people have to move around, but that is kind of important to add a new dimension to card games done well. And most card games don't do it because, wargaming already fills that niche, but it's not to say there isn't a niche already. And if you look at my video on Legacy Allure, or Legacies Allure, you'll see that that's also a game which is using physical locations and cards very well, I would say. And I would say between the two of that game and this game, we kind of have an opening in the market, in my mind, for a game that feels like it has some of the elements of a warband game like Mordheim, combined with the complete deck building flexibility of a TCG. And both of those games are starting to harness that trend, where I want to be able to build a deck that is incredibly flexible, doesn't require a lot of time painting like a miniatures game, but does bring this element of physicality and location and movement to a game in a way that really you can't capture unless you're willing to go digital and play like Gloomhaven on or something like that with miniatures. And also, that's very hard to do. That's very hard to do. Like, you've got your Super Fantasy Brawls and you've got your Warhammer Underworlds, but those are all like miniatures based, which means you have to base them around certain heroes in terms of having an actual model, whereas this kind of gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of deck building. So you're going to use this arena, this 5x6 grid arena. I have a map behind me somewhere. And essentially you're going to play your cards both onto it in terms of summons and your champion, but also you're going to play spells that are dictated by range. So it's kind of like that feeling of a tabletop D&D fight, but in a 1v1 card game, which I feel is going to resonate with a lot of people. And that's one of the reasons that I decided to get involved in this game, and one of the reasons I decided to back the Kickstarter, and I have the starters around here. And that's kind of where it is. Where this game's going to go, and I don't want to do a super huge video, I am obviously going to go and do more videos on this because... spoilers, the creator of the game, who I've had only positive interactions with, one of my first boxes actually had a print error where I had a lot of cards that just said placeholder, or I think it was placeholder or something instead of all of the Majestics in one box. And he was basically like, well, what Majestics do you want? I'll send them to you. And I was like, well, just send me some because I don't know what they are. But my point is he customer service was great. he sent them out to me really quickly. He gave me a choice. Imagine if you're sitting there in Flesh and Blood and someone's like, well, your box didn't have any Majestics in. What Majestics do you want? And you turn around and said, well, can I have some Command and Conquers, please? And they were like, yeah, okay, cool. And I didn't ask for like the most expensive card because I don't know what they were. I just said, can you send me some good stuff that I'm going to enjoy playing? And he was like, well, I'll send you, one of the best cards for all the factions so that when you decide what you want to play, you can figure out and you can include them. And I was like, that's awesome. 100%, felt really good about that because I feel a lot of people would have just given me the cards that I was meant to get according to the algorithm or whatever, whereas they actually dealt with it quite nicely. So I think that's really, really cool. Customer service aside, he also reached out to me saying like, how do you want to cover this game? Because I think one of his friends had said, look, Steelfur, he's quite good about strategy and stuff like that, and he's big in terms of being involved in the Flesh and Blood community as well. So he was like, well, how do you want to cover the game? And I said, actually, what would be really interesting is if I watch some more of the gameplay and I try and figure out the strategy behind the game and I can talk about that. And he was like, well, why don't I set you up with, one of the judges or the champion from our recent championship, and you can talk through the strategy that you see in the game that he played. And I was like, that sounds really interesting. So whether that happens or not, that if this game shows the strategic promise that I think it does, I'm going to be watching this game very closely. I'm not saying it's going to take me away from Flesh and Blood, because Flesh and Blood I am fully invested in, and it is such a good game, and I just keep playing it more and more. We had that joke about Flesh and Blood, which is that every time we finish playing it, someone starts playing it again. It's like we finish a tournament, okay, let's draft. And I'm not saying that this will be my main game, but I think that is at least shows a lot of potential and also just a lot of fresh ideas. I really think a lot of fresh ideas. I like the addition of just the champion-led deck building design, because a lot of what you get from, say, something like Commander format and Magic is that excitement of seeing a new champion and having that champion completely dictate how you are going to build and design your deck and your strategy. And people love that. It's really resonant. The other important thing, of course, and a lot of people have that from Flesh and Blood as well, is this idea of your champion determines your deck. But one of the things this actually does better than Flesh and Blood is that by having cards that belong to all of these different elements / colors, which can or cannot fit into your deck based on how you're building it, you actually have a lot more flexibility to build a deck than you do in a game like Flesh and Blood. Because Flesh and Blood is limited by class, whereas, obviously, this is limited by the factions that the card belongs to. So you're going to have a lot of deck building flexibility, which is going to be very, very useful and exciting in terms of how you actually sit down and build your deck. Give you a lot of flexibility, but also give you that build around excitement that people want from people want from the game, where they see one card, the champion, and they think, okay, this looks like a really interesting strategy. Let me follow that to its natural conclusion and enhance that. One of the things that gets people lost a lot of the time, and one of the reasons that Commander is so popular, beside from being a 4-person social format, is the fact that it gets you really, really excited about a specific legendary, because you always have access to it. And then that itself underpins and guides your entire strategy for how you're defining things and how you're building a deck to match it. So that's kind of like why I'm really excited about it. Now, obviously, as the months go by, I'm going to have to do more. I'm going to have to do more deck building, more strategy research into this game if I want to cover it properly. I will at some point, I guess, have some of these content creator, your logo here promos that I'll give out. That'll be quite exciting. Hopefully, they have a bear. If they have a bear in the set, then obviously, hopefully it's good. And if it's good, then I would like my promo on it. If not, I'll take a promo of something that people will play. That would be good. There's loads of other cool stuff, I guess, added on here. You can see that they initially didn't think they would get tons of money, but, you're getting involved now. You're going to get a foil copy of all of these champions. You're going to get a deck box add-on, which I think you have to buy. You're getting some alternate art, which is kind of cool. This is Gamegenics. It's not my favorite, but they do make good deck boxes, to be fair. There's various coins and stuff like that. You get these coins as well, which is kind of cool. It's just nice. I mean, this is a well-run Kickstarter. There's a lot of little stretch goals, none of which is And this is important for Kickstarters. Remember, red flags for Kickstarters are overambitious stretch goals and overpromising on deadlines. So the stretch goals for these are all perfectly manageable. It's a foil version of some cards, which is really nice, but not hard to do. It's an alt art commissioned by one artist, which is actually really easy to pay that artist to do. Like, it doesn't take that long or even that much money once you've got 250 grand in the bank to pay an artist to do an exclusive piece of artwork, and then putting that in is really easy. A custom coin on a poker chip is fairly easy. A custom deck box is fairly easy. These coins are fairly easy. A sticker is fairly easy. All of these stretch goals fall into the category of things that are very, very nice, but not difficult. And that's very important for Kickstarter. Again, because one of the things that you'll look as we're scrolling through this whole thing, beyond just talking about the game and things like that, is the red flags from Kickstarter. And we're not really seeing a lot of those here. Okay? Now, the only two things that I think will be difficult to do are their stretchiest of stretch goals. Obviously, they held the 2022 championship event, which was based in Canada. But I think they are planning to expand that, one in Canada, one in the US, one in the EU. Obviously, this is a Canadian-based game, so you expect it to start there. But you can see they have as their stretch goals adding more events, which is a really good stretch goal, by the way, because I always maintain that competitive TCGs live and die based on the strength of their OP support. And this Kickstarter is kind of demonstrating that OP support is a key goal for this game in the short and long term. So I think that's really cool. Other stuff that's just nifty. There's a community-made card pitching thing going on now. There's updates. If you look at the updates, you'll see there's updates to that. So people are trying to make their own card. There's a recycling program. You do have to send the booster packs back to them, which obviously isn't going to be great for a lot of people in the EU and outside Canada. But you know, it would be cool if we can do a mass mailing of recycled stuff from the EU back to get it all recycled. A backer exclusive event, that's pretty cool. I wonder again if that'll only be in Canada or somewhere else. But you can see there's lots of different stretch goals and things going on. You know, they're doing box breaks of all the little stuff. We should make sure we're subscribed to them on YouTube. Go on. Yeah, I am indeed. So yeah, get those subscriber numbers up. I mean, I doubt they're going to reach 10,000 if they're only on 300. But, you know, you could be the excellent subscriber. There is also a tabletop simulator community where you can try the game before you actually commit to it, which is, of course, an acknowledgement that digital is one of the key pathways to actually getting, you know, the game into people's hands in 2021. The number of board game people I've seen who've started a Kickstarter and just haven't actually taken the time to make even a TTS mod. They've been like, well, people will play the cards if they buy the cards. It's like, no, people will play the cards if you get the cards into their hands in a way that they can play them. And if you get people testing on TTS, that may easily be a sale. Yeah, so generally this Kickstarter kind of answers all of my questions. Which is, they started this game. It's already been tested by a small community that's very, very excited about it. You know, there's been lots of playtesting. There's been an alpha, beta. There's been 2 or 3 sets that were very, very small. And then there was a Welcome to Jalara, a Jalara 2nd edition, which was quite big and was sold through like Kitchen Table TCG and other big stores. And generally, all they've done after that is just decide that really, if we want to do more, we need more money. And there's just absolutely nothing wrong with making that determination, right? Genesis isn't the biggest game right now. You're not buying necessarily into a big hype wave, the same way that someone like MetaZoo or something like that is, or Grand Archive or any of those other Kickstarters that have happened recently is trying to hype it up. But that doesn't mean that there isn't like opportunity for excitement getting in early. There's loads of nice add-ons and Kickstarter exclusive that's really interesting to see. But of course, the main thing is that this is a really interesting game, and I fully recommend people come and take a look at the gameplay videos, have a look at it and see if it's the sort of thing that you're interested in. Because if you're playing TCGs and you want more strategy and positioning and movement and all those kind of things to play a factor in your games and to have more to say about it than just, you know, oh, I play this card and it kills everything on the board. Like more than just the idea that my creatures can attack all of your creatures. wherever they are, just because I have them on the board, right? If you want to add more elements to your gameplay, then I would fully consider that this game is a good opportunity to add those elements in. And I think that's where I'll end on. My review of Genesis, I stand by my initial review of the rules, which is that they are very, very straightforward. They are, you know, very easy to understand. The deck building looks very straightforward as well. And just generally, it looks like it is bringing a good element of physicality and movement. And I love this little, like, if you look at the cards as well, they have this, like, this is where it affects if you do the cards. So it's a very visual, like, I'm going to cast Tsunami and it's going to hit these squares in front of me. And as someone who plays D&D, like, pretty religiously, and also always likes to play, like, area control classes, like wizards and druids and things like that, who can literally be like, well, if I put a blizzard here, then that person can't attack my cleric, and if I put a wall of force here, then that person can't cross, and my warrior can 1v1 that person. Now, as someone who's always doing that, the idea that I'm going to be able to play a game where there is an element of that physical arena where I can potentially use area control spells and things like that is actually really fascinating to me. So yeah, I recommend this Kickstarter. Look for a bit more Genesis content from me over the next few weeks as this Kickstarter is still going on. The deadline for the Kickstarter is, I think, in 25 days, so just into January. So you do have a bit of time. Get on TTS. I'll do a few more videos on it if you want to get involved. And really, I think this is just going to be an interesting game. If you're in the UK, if you're in London, I do want to play this game, a bit more. So, and I do have cards that I'm willing to bring in and we can play with. So, if you do want to play this game, do say so, and I can bring it into the Rule Zero shop or Darksphere or something like that. We can have some games. Other than that, just have a great weekend. And I guess if you don't watch another video of mine before Christmas, have a happy Christmas, and I will speak to you soon. Thanks a lot, and bye.